Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. I welcome all of you to today's Hindu News Analysis session with me on our platform. Now, before we start by looking at today's important news, here's a quick reminder. In case you are looking for expert guidance for the upcoming UPSC CSE exam, then look no further. You can fill up the Google form that has been provided in the description box of this video. And why will it help you? Because once we have your details, we will get in touch with you and arrange a one-on-one online counseling session with you. On this note now, let's come to today's main topic of discussion, and we are going to analyze 6 news pieces. Now, 3 of these demand a detailed analysis and they have been picked up from the perspective of UPSC Mains. The first news piece here has been picked up from today's The Hindu New Delhi edition, page number 8. It talks about a very complex social economic problem existing in India, and this is the reason why female migrant laborers have been not focused upon when it comes to policy making, when it comes to labor welfare. When it comes to women empowerment, then why is this particular segment of our economy, the women segment of migrant laborers, practically invisible to the policy makers, the causes, the consequences, and the ramifications? This is exactly what we are going to discuss in the first article. The second article for the mains discussion includes a news that talks about a bigger debate. On the face of it, we will discuss the Gruha Lakshmi scheme, a scheme that was initiated by the government of Karnataka to promote and provide easy, affordable housing for marginalized women. But how it became a controversy, how it became controversial with respect to the culture of freebies. This takes us to a whole new concept that's very integral and yet misunderstood. The concept comes from social issues and social justice, 2 topics that intersect with your GS Paper 1 and GS Paper 2 mains. The topic is culture of poverty, as propounded by one of the very famous thinkers and anthropologist, Oscar Louis. That's what we are going to talk about, the deeper meaning of the article. The third news piece here talks about, once again, a problem associated with women. This has been highlighted in page 14 of the Hindu, today's New Delhi edition. It talks about how the Indian government, inspired by a better performance of women in the labor force. Yes, you heard me right. Now, this news piece is not just about the problems of women in Indian labor force. In fact, it is a very positive development. And in the light of this positive development, what all does the government plan in the coming months to promote further engagement of women in the workforce? So this is something that we are going to discuss. And now, hopping down to the Prelims Bytes, we have a set of 3 fact-based articles as highlighted in today's newspaper. The first one here talks about how, once again it's a positive news, it talks about how India's snow leopard count has shot up dramatically. This is a wonderful news, not only for biodiversity, but also what ramifications does it have for India's ecotourism industry. The next article that we will focus for prelims is an article from page 14 that talks about UNESCO World Heritage Site. There is an upcoming development here. There is another beautiful cultural heritage site that is being nominated by the Indian government in the upcoming UNESCO World Heritage List for the year 24-25. What is this site? Why is it so significant? And in the longer run, what is the use, what is the purpose of the World Heritage culture that's being promoted by the UN? The last article for prelims talks about a very science technology oriented topic. It is a slightly deeper topic because here we are going to analyze a new discovery that has been made recently by astronomers, but it has all put them in shock because we are talking about a new revelation that has come in the field of black holes. Now, we know that from the recent Nobel Prizes to the upcoming ongoing research, black holes have been shrouded in mystery. The consequences of black hole discovery on current pace of research and its benefit for future astronomical operations, that's something that we can talk about in the reference of the mass gap. So now let's begin with our detailed discussion, and here the first article, as I said, is very relevant for your GS paper 2 social justice. It talks about participation of migrant women labor in Indian economy. It has been picked up from page 8 and the title says a blurred mapping, which means a very confused, a very unclear counting of internal women migrants in India. So what does this article talk about? Now let's do a comprehensive analysis so that you do not have to go back and read the article length and breadth. Now this article begins by having a quick discussion on what is internal migration in the first place. We know migration is often referred to as in macroeconomics and social issues as a spatial movement of people. When we say a spatial movement of people, we are talking about a geographical movement of people from one region to another. That's called migration. In this article, we will specifically focus on one type of migration that's referred to as internal migration, where an internal movement of people within the economy is witnessed. Now, India is one of the countries where from 2015 to 2018, we have seen much more internal migration as compared to international migration, which is often called emigration. That is, when you leave your economy, your country altogether. But here, we are talking about a spatial, a geographical movement of people from one state to another or within a state from one region to another. Could something as gender neutral as migration have a gender element to it? Can this be a gendered notion? Well, as per the article, it is. Because talking about internal migration, the biggest question is why people migrate within the country. The reasons are obvious. Migration, which is internal, could be on the lines of rural to urban migration, where people migrate in search of better jobs. So employment is the first reason why most people make a move towards urban areas. This is often referred to as the urban pull in macroeconomics and social issues. Urban pull are all those factors from a better employment opportunity to a better infrastructural living, that is a better quality of life. It could be for better education skills, for enhancing your skill and education, that is. And talking about women per se, another very critical reason for migration, specifically pertaining to women, is marriage. These are certain reasons why majority of people migrate from rural to urban, although internal migration comes in many shapes. There is one that's referred to as circular migration, when people do not permanently go out of their native place, but they constantly rotate between their residence and the workplace. It is often witnessed in the case of satellite cities in India. Satellite cities such as Gurgaon, where the commercial hub is at the center and at the periphery are residential areas. It corresponds with the concentric city planning model, as is being witnessed in majority of Indian cities which are experiencing corporatization or industrialization, if you see. So in case of circular migration, people keep fluctuating, they keep rotating. In fact, this is the most difficult segment to map when we talk about migrants. The next could be rural to rural, urban to urban, urban to rural, which is often also referred to as reverse migration. A very good example of reverse migration you might have seen during the COVID pandemic, where a majority of construction laborers, marred by pandemic, by lockdown, by deficient economic employment opportunities and lack of food, lack of necessities, had to actually go back to their native states. A majority of construction laborers had to reverse migrate back to the North Indian states from where they had actually come to work in the pockets of states like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, which are urbanized to a higher degree. But in this article, rather than these manifestations of migration, we will focus upon one particular kind of migration, and that's referred to as urban pull or the rural to urban migration. Why does this happen and what does this mean? As I said, Indian agriculture, which engages more than half of our workforce, a mainstay of our economy, is also therefore characterized by a very high population pressure on land, which means that agriculture today is experiencing a high degree of seasonal plus disguised unemployment. There are fewer employment opportunities owing to the lack of development per se, lack of modernization in agriculture. Another very critical reason is land fragmentation. The fact that post-independence period to now, constantly the land holding of an average family has declined dramatically, which means that it is difficult for the limited area of land to provide for a burgeoning, for an increasing population in agriculture. Now in India, a very interesting phenomena happens, which I often tell students in the class of social issues and justice, that although when people in agriculture experience a high degree of seasonal and disguised migration, they typically migrate into cities because of urban pull. Factors which pull you towards urban areas, factors which promote urban immigration coming in the cities. In India, not much changes when a family or a particular laborer migrates speedily from village to the city. There is something else that changes. And this change can be defined as a formula. It is almost like seasonal plus disguised unemployment of the village gets translated into structural plus vulnerable unemployment of the cities. Why? The primary reason is a gap that exists in between. Now we are talking about laborers from agriculture who might be skilled or semi-skilled or sometimes even unskilled. And now suddenly they experience a migration to the cities. What happens? An immediate result of that is, although they will find some job in the city, but they will not find a job in the formal sector of the economy. They will not find a job in the organized sector of the economy. They will not find a job that's referred to as a white-collar job. So what happens to these people? They experience a kind of leak gap. And this leak gap refers to the fact that the same people who were marred by disguised and seasonal unemployment today become critical victims of vulnerable unemployment, which is also often referred to as hidden unemployment. There is another good word for it. It is known as invisible unemployment. Why do we call it invisible? For that, we have to understand the article more in greater detail. So this is the essence of the article, right? Now, as I said, when migration takes place from village to cities, as we saw, so many people after migrating into cities end up as victims of vulnerable unemployment, which means that although they are working, but the question is, where are they working? And the place in which they are employed, the sector in which they are employed is referred to as an invisible sector. Why so? Because it is a sector that is completely out of government's purview. It is a sector that does not offer you a productive job. A productive job, as per economics, is a job that gives you a decent salary, a standard wage as per the labor laws of your country. A job that provides you social security, which could include insurance, medical leaves, pension schemes, employment provident fund and all of that. And these people, because they are working in the invisible sector, are into non-productive or blue-collar jobs. Which means that they are working in a sector that's typically informal, unorganized. They are working, but are they visible to us? No, because neither are they paying taxes, nor can the government locate them and do some social benefit for them. Nor do you see any contract that they sign for taking up this job, neither verbal nor written. So what happens? This is known as workforce leakage, and a very important term. Workforce leakage manifests in the form of new type of unemployment, and this creates a category of people referred to as ghost employees, people who work. But where do they work? Invisible sectors. They could be domestic maids, they could be construction site laborers, they could be working in bangle making, beadi making, toy making, apparel making, footwear making, sometimes even bricklaying industry, firecracker making industry, and all these industries do not give you a productive job. In fact, you are working in a segment of economy that's practically invisible. So your contribution to the national income, to the GDP, that's not something that can be counted, and then you become a ghost employee. And this is exactly the essence of this article. That although the government does understand that a majority of people who migrate from rural to city and end up becoming a ghost employee need help, but the people who are getting most of the attention happen to be men. So definitely there is a gender concept to this entire workforce leakage. It is highly engendered. What are the reasons of this? The reason is that majority of women who are associated with internal migration, women who are referred to as internal female migrants, these are associated with marital migration. They migrate because of marriage, not necessarily because of being employed somewhere, not necessarily because they are educating themselves or taking up a better skill. And therefore, it is believed that they are not contributing in the labor force. Another very sad reality is, which is also true, that most of the people who do this kind of urban pull migration are invariably numerically men, because it is the women today in India who are mostly employed in the agriculture sector, and that too where? In the agriculture sector, manual jobs. Petty jobs like harvesting, sowing, cutting, blue-collar jobs, jobs which require physical capacity but not necessarily any intellectual skill. This is where majority of Indian women are employed today. In fact, this is the largest contributor to women's vulnerable unemployment. Always remember. So this is exactly what we are talking about, that in India, it is because most women are associated with marriage migration. Apart from that, a majority of them do not migrate, they are left behind in the agriculture sector. The minimal component of them who actually undergo the migration to work in the construction site in urban areas, to work in urban industry and manufacturing, are somehow invisible to the government. There has been no proper policy of welfare that has been specifically targeted to migration. So the internal migration is quite hefty in India, obviously because we discussed employment factors and better skill enhancement factors. But again, the problem is the left behind, or the grey area here, is the women migrant force, because they are very minimal in number. That's one thing. Another thing is they are victims of vulnerable unemployment. The third thing is they are theoretically associated with marriage. So it's a very patriarchal narrative that works in this case. Now, talking about which sectors of the economy have benefited the most with women internal migration. Some of these sectors are domestic work. Now, whenever women migrate into urban areas, as I said, these are unskilled, semi-skilled women. They will not easily find work in the formal sector. So they end up becoming ghost employees, and mostly they get employed in domestic work. That's true of many countries across the world, including urban India. Similarly, health and social care. Now, this category of women who typically find work in hospitals or nursing homes as caregivers, as nursing attendees, are referred to as pink-collar employees. Again, we see a gender manifestation of workforce. That in the pink-collar segment, a majority of semi-skilled women will be employed, who are educated but not necessarily in the STEM field, that's the technical field, or who are educated but they do not have a higher education with them. Now, apart from that, elementary occupations could be lower skilled, unskilled jobs. As I said, in India, if you see today, then a majority of women will be found, apart from agriculture, which is the biggest employment generator for unorganized sector women. It's the bangle making, it's the brick making, it is the silica mining, or it is also the beady making industry, sometimes even fabric dyeing industries, toy making industry. So most of these women work in such sectors. There is a reason why we often also use the word social dumping in this context. The article indirectly refers to social dumping as well. Now, social dumpings happen as a result of the fact that most of these women who are blue-collar employees in India, who are the ghost employees, they work in sectors which do not follow any labor standard, neither as per the directions of the International Labour Organization, nor as per the directions of the national government. One reason is they are invisible employees. The government doesn't know how to track, trace them and help them out. Another reason could be a lack of awareness among these women. The reason is that India is a signee to 6 conventions of ILO out of compulsory 8 core conventions, and interestingly, 2 of these, whether it's 138 or whether it's 100, talk about welfare of the marginalized workers. For example, the 100th convention speaks about equal pay for equal work. But does that happen in the unorganized sector? Sadly not. Because most of the unorganized sector, whether it be brick industry or whether it be firecracker making industry, whether it be agriculture labor, has a presumption that women have a lower physical productivity than men. And it is very, very avid in the way bias has been happening in certain government-induced schemes like the Manrika. Even here, if you see, female beneficiaries are minimal because the demand is towards a heavy physical labor job, and in which it is presumed that women wouldn't be able to do that. And therefore, 100th convention not followed. Similarly, 138th convention, which talks about creating safe conditions of work, which talks about how we should abolish any kind of unsafe work, no child labor, that is also barely followed in the unorganized sector industry. So now what happens? It is these women who typically migrate shorter distances as compared to men, typically to a nearby city to work, due to the urban pull factors, are also people who experience minimal benefit from the government. As I said, the main reason here has been a male-dominated attitude towards migrant laborers. Presumably, it is assumed that it is men who are majority of migrant laborers. Numerically, sometimes yes, but technically, it is women who deserve equal attention because they are employed in various sectors of unorganized economy, and nobody even knows the right estimate of it. So therefore, women of working age specifically, that is, women from 15 to 49, which also contributes to India's demographic dividend in a big way, are the worst victims of this particular kind of neglect from policymakers. Also, this has another very sad element to it. The fact that India has constantly been experiencing a very, very lower than global average female labor force participation rate. Now, workforce is a component of economy where we include the workers who are already engaged in employment, some employment, or those who are willing to take up a job if they get the opportunity to. Now, in this case, there is absolutely a workforce leakage that we see. Women are minimally engaged in the workforce. What's the biggest reason according to you? As we just discussed, the biggest reason is vulnerable unemployment. A lot of people feel that women do not work, and that's the reason why the FLFPR, the female labor force participation rate in India, is very low. But in reality, a bigger reason is vulnerable unemployment because women work. It's not like they don't work. The only problem is they work in invisible sector and they end up becoming ghost employees, critical victims of social dumping and casualization of labor. The second reason, of course, behind very, very low FLFPR, women labor force participation, is lack of human social capital, and this is exactly what this article also talks about. The fact that in India, majority of women, that's girls, do not take up STEM education, that's the science, technology, engineering, math education, a field of education that's associated with a higher rate of job in formal sector, white collar sector. That doesn't happen in the case of women. There is a educational academic gap here. For those who do, according to one of the studies conducted 2 years back by UN, out of 50,000 women who had taken up STEM education, only 14% were able to find job in the formal sector. Why? Again, this becomes an episode of workforce leakage. Trained women again absent from workforce. The reasons are then social, cultural, religious. Early marriage, lack of continuity, lack of academic continuation, lack of research opportunities, motherhood, forced motherhood, lack of opportunity to upgrade your skill, which is often referred to as time poverty. Now, these are all technical words we use talking about gender studies. Time poverty, once again a phenomena that this article touches upon. And the article says that time poverty happens when women, because of the dual responsibility or the dual burden as we call it, between domestic unpaid labor plus workforce labor. When we say workforce, we can presume that a majority of them are in the invisible sector. The combination of paid work and the unpaid work together creates a dual burden where a woman becomes a constant employee at home, outside home as well. And this contributes to time poverty. Time poverty would mean a woman does not get the time to upgrade her skills, which would be needed in case you want to compete with your male counterparts in the workforce, in the formal sector. And that's also a major reason why women constantly stick in the invisible sector or in the informal sector. They aren't able to proceed or progress to a remarkably better job. Now, again, this article talks about a data by Periodic Labour Force Survey. It says that 3/4 of women in India who are internally migrating are unemployed. So they migrate because of marriage or some other cultural reason. 14% are wage labourers. They work for daily wage. They work in the unorganized sector. They work in the invisible sector, as we said. And 12% are experiencing casual labour, which means that they are easy fire, easy hire labour. When we talk about casual labour, we must touch upon the vendor system. Now, vendor system is a very ugly offshoot of something that is referred to as the structural adjustment program. A whole new debate which we shall touch upon. probably in some other relevant news piece. But this article touches upon casual labor, which means casual labor is a direct offshoot of vendor system, a system where vendoring companies hire labor and then they provide them to various corporations without really bothering that these corporations will give them a decent salary or take care of their social benefits. So this is very, very easy hire, easy fire labor, and an ultimate epitome of social dumping for a majority of women. So that's what the survey also says, that if in this situation, women who actually, the remaining women who are actually employed, even for them there is an underreporting. We do not know how many of them are working for the formal sector in case they are. And even when we talk about disguised sector, the invisible sector, we really do not know how many of them are working in which sector specifically. So how can we help them? How can the government promote welfare initiatives for them? Now, most women, as I said, who are migrant laborers internally, they work in agriculture. Agriculture contributes to more than 60% of women unorganized work, always remember. The biggest invisible sector employment for women. Next is construction sector. The third is domestic help sector. So are these ghost women? That's a valid question we should ask ourselves. And yes, they are. Majority of them are ghost employees because as per most of the central government national surveys, it is these women who work without any verbal or written contract by their employers, which again leads to a cycle of abuse and a cycle of underpaid and low skill work. So therefore, these women are often seen doing unpaid family work. Now, women who are contributing, say for example, in domestic liquor manufacturing, that's also a very important segment of the economy, or the bricklaying industry. Here, they work to support their families, but they do not get any income out of it. So once again, not only are they victims of time poverty, but also they are presumably unemployed, vulnerable, ghost employees. Sometimes even self-employed women who are running a small cottage industry or who are doing a small initiative by themselves. Vendors, even they become a part of the invisible sector. So therefore, all these often are presumed to be extensions of domestic labor, and these women are not given the status of regular employees. Now, the article also questions, why is it such a problem for Indian women to enter the formal labor force? Why are they constantly hanging in the informal sector, becoming the ghost employees? The reason is lack of human social capital. The fact is that, as per the PLFS data findings, 85% of women have less than 10 years of formal education. This points out to a massive gap in academics. Obviously, with less education, less higher education and less skill enhancement, it is difficult for women to find entry into white-collar jobs or the formal sector jobs, organized sector jobs. Even if you talk about the education vocational skills, with migrant women, even these are much lesser. Why? Because migrant women come from a segment of society that's constantly into movement geographically from one state to another. A very good example I can give you here. It is a case study that you must investigate into. It's called as the sugarcane cutters or the sugarcane harvesters, Indian women employees. Now, this study interestingly talks about a place in Maharashtra known as Bid. Bid in Maharashtra is famous for sugar cutting and sugarcane harvesting activities. Here, most of the people who are into this sector are women. They are the ones who harvest and cut and sort out the sugarcane once it's grown. The problem is that it is a very heavy work for these women, and it has resulted in a very ugly situation. It has had a very, very dehumanizing impact of these women because this work demands heavy effort. It's a very demanding job, a complete blue-collar job. As a result of this, employers did not want women to work here. But these women had no choice. They had to constantly migrate from Karnataka to Maharashtra and to UP to find work wherever sugarcane harvesting is possible at given times of the year, at different seasons of the year. Now what happened is that this has shot up the cases of unwanted, unauthorized, unlicensed hysterectomies in women, which means that their uterus is being removed. They themselves agree to get their uterus removed. It's a complete dehumanizing. It's taking away women's reproductive right. Why? To get a basic minimum wage. Because if they have a uterus, if they do not go for this surgery, then they may experience pregnancy, they may experience menstrual cycle, and this is something that prohibits them from being as productive as their male counterparts. So this is the dehumanizing side of women getting employed in the invisible sector, and that's what the article talks about. Also, the article says that COVID pandemic made the situation more worse because 55% women who did reverse migration because of lockdown never returned back to the place where they had job. Most of them did not even find the same salary as they used to earn before the COVID pandemic. Obviously, this also points down to the recession in the economy overall. Now, there is a big paradox here that although 101% is the increase in women internal migration in India from 2001 to 2011, and yet they are considered as invisible, and yet there is nothing that we have done much to help them. So could there be any solutions? Yes, the article does talk about certain solution. The biggest solution is being more gender sensitive when it comes to policies like one nation, one ration card. Majority number of times these women, because of lack of documents and lack of access to government authorities, are unable to furnish documents. They do not therefore get the benefit of policies like the PDS, the public distribution system, or policies such as Janani Suraksha scheme, which talks about giving women some subsidy, giving women some cash benefit in case of their first delivery. Similarly, you can talk about the Ujjwala scheme. You can talk about the e-Shram portal, where the government is envisaging enlisting the names of workers who are engaged in the unorganized sector. But do women feature here? Not really, because we just do not need overall policies. Let us not talk about homogeneous policies to help migrants. Let's talk about very, very gender-specific policies to help the migrants. This could also be done through better time use data. Time use data is the technique of data collection where you actually study the life pattern of a given group of people over a period of time in a particular sector or in a particular region. So that's what needs to be done. These women who are constantly migrating need to be studied, surveyed. Their problems have to be understood not only through time use data or through collection of women-specific data, but also through qualitative data, interviews, questionnaires, and many other ways in which respondents can explain the problems that they go through. So we could end this article on a slightly more thought-provoking note. Now there is another place called Murshidabad. There are a majority of women who are poor. They are engaged in beedi rolling industry. Now these women, because they are extremely poor, have no choice but to continue to work in this sector. Problems, ramifications. The biggest problem is health crisis. Not only are they facing reproductive health crisis, they are experiencing asthma, lung cancers, tuberculosis, but they have no other place to work. Talking about specific policies to help them? Not really. So still, we are yet to see a situation where the government strongly implements the Social Security Code. 2020, which is coming after revision of existing labour laws to help people who are working in unorganized sector by creating employment provident fund, insurance, medical leave benefits for these people, maternity leaves for these people, to cover people who are in the GIG platform work also, and a major of these people are women. So on that note, we can end this article and progress to our next article that's coming from Social Issues GS Paper 1. It's taken from page 14 of today's Hindu. It talks about, once again, an intriguing problem. Definitely, it also talks about a problem associated with gender parity, but it says that how the central government has just initiated a very interesting, a very new method of survey to collect ground data, real-time data about the problems that women employees are facing. So in the previous article, we were talking about the gap between women of the formal sector, which are very less, and the majority Indian women of the informal sector, specifically about the migrant women labourer. In this article, rather than focusing on the problems of women in the informal sector, we are actually talking about all those women who exist in the workforce. So indirectly, we are referring to women in the formal sector itself. So why is this article important? This article talks about recently how the Union Ministry of Labour and Employment, along with the Ministry of Women and Child Development, have started a survey. It's a joint survey. Purpose? To increase women participation in the workforce. Now, repeatedly, we have been touching upon a very interesting theme. That in India, if you compare it with the global or South Asian average, the overall participation of women in the labour force is very, very low. But there has been a finding that is encouraging, a finding that is there to cheer us up. And according to that finding, recently, the number of women who were engaged in the labor force has actually shot up to 37% as per the Periodic Labour Force Survey released by the NSO under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. That's recently in October 2023. So out of all the complaints that we make regarding lesser women participation, this data highlights an improvement. It says that 37% women today are engaged in the labour force. That's in 2023. That's very positive. Given that recently, just a few years back in 2019 to 2020, we had less than 20% women who were translating into the workforce, which means that today about 37% of women, nearly half, they are engaged in formal, organized sector of the economy. That's a very positive development. So encouraged by this positive development, the government has taken a very unique initiative. This initiative was recently announced by Union Minister Mrs. Smriti Irani, and this was done with the theme Women in Workforce for a Viksit Bharat, which means that women in workforce will translate into a highly developed and economically progressive India. Why am I calling this survey or this initiative so unique and so distinctive? One reason is its anonymity. The fact that the purpose behind the survey is that now all the women who are working in different corporate sectors, different government departments, different companies, they will be contacted. They will be contacted how? Because their details are available in case they are beneficiaries of any government plan or any government initiative, or if they are registered in any government bank. So collecting this data, the government will reach out to these women and ask them a set of questionnaires. These questionnaires will have the intention of identifying, directly interacting with these women. Of course, without their name. It's an anonymous review. That's the best part of it. That women can now freely communicate directly to the government whether the organization in which they are working has done enough to promote gender parity for them. Has it done enough to promote their participation in the organization? Are they experiencing a safe and a respectable culture in their workplace? Do they have policies in case they experience any harassment? Do they have options of vertical mobility in the organization? All these will be asked by the government to these employees directly. And therefore, the survey is just trying to identify the gap. The survey is obviously coming in the light of this positive development, but it also is trying to identify the gap. Whosoever are the remaining components of women who have not yet reached the workforce, what is the problem and how can we bring them at par to the existing ones? For the existing ones, how can we make sure that they are retained in the workforce? Now, as I mentioned in the previous article, another problem of women participation in India, in the economy, is leakage. Now, we often talk about workforce leakage. In our country, it often happens that women who are working in the formal sector, in some company or in the government department, after a few years, they just drop out. These are referred to as workforce dropout women. Why do they drop out? They drop out because of various social cultural compulsions. A very big reason in India is actually motherhood and marriage. These two are very critical cultural reasons why women stop working. How could these gaps be fulfilled? Another reasons could of course be a high domestic demand, perhaps a very, very high demand of family labor. The fact that in family today, we still believe in very stereotypical gender notions that women has to work in the family as well as in the workforce. Another reason could be, as I said, time poverty. Being caught up in the dual burden of paid and unpaid labor, perhaps women are not getting the opportunities of migrating to a better job. So to close all these gaps, the government is now trying to ask the women directly that what is the problem that you experience in your company or in your organization? Because we are now trying to spread a women employee friendly culture in our economy. Only then can we talk about further boosting the FLFPR that's there in the country today. Now, various international agencies, including the International Labour Organization, have often pointed out to the problems faced by Indian women employees who are engaged in the workforce. Now, on this note, we must also quickly mention that how in 2013 the government had introduced the POSH Act, Prevention of Sexual Harassment of Women at Workforce. It was amended much later, multiple times. The purpose behind this, it was taken after an inspiration from the Vishakha Guidelines of the Honorable Supreme Court back in 1997, which said that there is a need to protect women from sexual harassment at workforce. To further this ideology, the government made it mandatory that any company, any organization which has more than 10 employees will have to open and maintain an internal complaints cell. It's very critical because in this internal complaints cell, any complaints, any issues regarding women molestation should be investigated, and for investigation, this cell will have the powers of a civil court. Plus, there were constant trainings, there were constant instructions to various companies, the HR departments, to make sure that women feel safe. There were many other conditions issued by the government, such as providing safe transport for women, prohibiting women to be employed after 7 p.m. without their permission. All of these to promote women participation again. So there have been progressive developments. The development that we see today, the shooting up of FLFPR to 37% is normally an offshoot of these initiatives. But today, there is much more that we can do. For example, in order to promote equal pay for equal work, more gender sensitization would be required. In order to make sure that organizations that are semi-governmental in nature or organizations that are purely private, who are still not subscribing to the POSH Act, who are not following the labor rules, they must be taken into account. So these are something that we can do to further promote women participation, and that's exactly what that article talks about. And now we can come to another article that's been taken from page 9 of the Hindu today. And this is something that relates once again to social justice GS paper 2. But here we are talking about a specific scheme of the government known as Gruha Lakshmi scheme. So let's quickly analyze what is this Gruha Lakshmi scheme, but more important is to see that why has it become such a controversial issue. The intention behind the Karnataka government for initiating the Gruha Lakshmi scheme was to support poor women in the state by providing them access to quality housing. So the targeted beneficiaries under this scheme were women who are living below the poverty line or women who are considered as multidimensionally poor, categorized under the Antyodaya Yojana. Under the scheme, a help of rupees 2,000 would be provided on a monthly basis to these women who run their families, who are the head of these families. The purpose was to enable them not only a better quality life through this direct benefit transfer. Now, direct benefit transfer happens when the government directly remits some amount to the account of the beneficiary. This is also referred to as cash assistance. Always remember that social welfare schemes can be both. There could be skill upgradation schemes, or sometimes there could be DBT schemes where direct financial help is provided. The government also tried to simplify the process so that the beneficiaries could reach out to the government authorities and just to make sure that the money is credited to the right beneficiaries. Ultimate objective was to improve living standards of these people, also to make sure that they can afford themselves some quality housing, to reduce the problem of urban ghettoization in India. That was the intention, but it got embroiled in some controversy. Why did it become such a controversial issue? Now, the issue goes back to the fact that this decision of Karnataka government was perceived as something that would become a very unnecessary, a very demanding overhead on the government, because about 1.3 crore beneficiaries are already registered, which means that you need more than 32,000 crore rupees to fulfill the idea of the scheme. So for a lot of people, it is believed that it is a burden on the government. A lot of people complained that we are just trying to promote the culture of freebies. We are trying to create a culture of economic dependence. And these people say that. Why to provide direct benefit transfer? Why to give cash assistance? A much better strategy would be to pick out the people who are in need of upliftment and empower them through skills. Other initiatives such as the 2015 Skill India initiative or the Self-Help Group initiative. These are much better initiatives as already being done under National Urban and Rural Livelihoods Mission. Why not focus on that? Why provide people cash benefit help directly. So therefore, it was told as something that is unnecessary, and that's promoting the culture of poverty. Now, talking of culture of poverty, the ideology goes back to macroeconomics and social issues. It was an idea that was expounded by a very famous social anthropologist known as Oscar Louis. Now, this thinker said that in a society, if the government starts providing too much welfare, too much subsidy, and too much economic help to a particular segment of people, they become dependents, chronic dependents on the government. They do not want to break out of the cycle of poverty. They constantly stay in the same situation, which further creates not only a cycle of poverty, it also promotes intergenerational poverty. Many generations of the same family being in the poverty cycle. This is one common argument in this favor. However, as per the government and as per women help groups, today we are experiencing a new dimension of problem in urban India. We all know that the demographic twist has already begun. We know that on the one hand, we are experiencing a lack of employment opportunities. On the other hand, we are witnessing a steady rise in old age population, which is referred to as geriatric population. People above the age of 60, because of demographic change, eventually the number of people above 60 years of age is rising in India, just like in any other economy, whether you talk about US, Japan, South Korea, Canada. Now, in those economies, it's way more high. India still has an average young population. We are enjoying the demographic dividend, but still, the population is rapidly aging. In a situation like this, the burden of elderly care, the burden of domestic household works, the burden of earning and supplementing an extra income all falls on the shoulders of women. And in this situation, the concern of the government is that if not provided with additional cash benefit, these women will never be able to access quality household or quality infrastructure. So that's at the heart of the article. Also, as per the main concerns highlighted by the government says that the participation of women today in good remunerative jobs is very, very less. And on the contrary, their contribution in unpaid family work is very, very high as compared to men. Another thing is, as per time use survey conducted by NSO, 57.3% of men were involved in employment or other remunerative activities, but women only 8.4%. Similarly, 81.2% women were constantly reeling under time poverty. They were not only doing domestic services for free, they were also undertaking some supplementary income for the household, whereas men, only 26.1% were engaged in unpaid domestic duties. Again, a very gendered force of Indian family and workforce. In poor families, women also do not have the liberty for offshoring their duties to a hired help. They cannot hire medical help for elderly care, reproductive health care. Also, it's difficult for them to hire maids or to offshore their duties to other people. In that case, they are the ones who are constantly getting exploited. And therefore, they are becoming not only victims of time, but also multi-dimensional poverty. A very interesting initiative, which talks about measuring poverty not just through income, but through many other dimensions. And Indian government, the Niti Aayog today, which is annually releasing a report on multi-dimensional poverty, generally includes 12 criteria to measure the multidimensional poverty, and women are lower on all these counts. Some of them include access to schooling, some of them include access to good quality reproductive jobs, some of them are access to healthcare, basic healthcare, some of them are sanitation, drinking water, electricity, a concrete housing, also access to LPG connection, bank accounts. All of these are criteria measured under MDP, and women are quite poor when you compare it the overall performance as compared to the male counterparts. So therefore, as urbanization is increasing and as the elderly population is shooting up, women are empirically, it's a proven evidence that women are experiencing a lot of pressure. And therefore, in that case, the government sees nothing wrong with the scheme. The government believes that if we are to stick to the ideal of socialistic democracy that was once enshrined by the policymakers of the Constitution back in 1944, we must talk about redistributive justice. And redistributive justice happens when the government tries to allocate resources to the poor and the marginalized. But there is another suggestion given to the government, also being mulled over, being thought over by the government, because certain institutes like the Agriculture Think Tank of India, the IFPRI, it says that it is good to have such initiatives. There is nothing wrong with them. because when the government had started PM Kisan scheme for the welfare of farmers by providing them direct cash benefit up to rupees 6,000, it helped them tremendously, because it not only helped them in purchasing agriculture inputs, providing a steady income, it also shot up the aggregate demand in Indian agriculture sector. Now, once demand goes up, naturally economy performs better. So there are ripple effects of providing cash benefits. Also, to be noted that during COVID pandemic, the government was providing a lot of cash benefit assistance to a lot of migrant labor and poor people. That did volumes to enable consumption standards for them. Now, in that light, the government also is thinking of an alternate way to reduce its burden. We need to do the welfare, but we also need to do some counterbalancing. And the best strategy would be to finance for this overhead expenditure that's going for Gruha Lakshmi scheme through increasing direct taxes on certain luxury good items, as well as excise taxes on premium liquor items. So these are segments from where the government can create easy finance and then deroute them into areas where they are badly needed, such as welfare schemes and SOPs for the marginalized. On this note, now let's come to an article that's primarily fact-based. It's been on page 14 of today's newspaper. It relates to biodiversity and ecology, and this therefore is attributed to GS paper 3. Now there is another piece of good news when we talk about Indian biodiversity and ecology, and it is that snow leopards, which are characterized by a whitish palish look, fur, a thick fur, because they are people, they are animals, a set of animals who are absolutely able to sustain the harsh cold climates of the mountainous territories, and hence they have a thick coat, a thick fur, which is primarily whitish in color with certain stripes. So this is associated with a sister family of conventional tigers. Now this species of leopards, the snow leopards, the population of them has shot up dramatically. And talking about a 4-year survey that was initiated back in 2019 and shortly ended, says that the total population across India is estimated as 718. So this genre of snow leopards in India has done very well. It has adapted very well. So this is a very positive development both ways. Talking about biodiversity, now this animal is a key species of Himalayan biodiversity, which means that in the terms of biological biodiversity conservation, it has been a major achievement. Also, it will trigger a massive ecotourism potential for Himalayan states. Ecotourism corresponds to when tourists are attracted to natural attractions corresponding to unique sub-ecosystems. So here, both ways, it's a beneficial thing, not only climatically, but also in terms of economy. Now, the snow leopard population has tremendously increased because of efforts in the direction that have been put by the government over the past 10 years. Say, for example, cameras were located in the vicinity of these animals. There was treatment provided immediately. The animals were trapped, they were medicated, care were taken so that the dying, dwindling population is stabilized. So therefore, this study that was conducted by the Wildlife Institute of India and released by the Union Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change says that maximum number of snow leopards in India were found in Ladakh, only to be followed by Uttarakhand and then Himachal Pradesh. So all these are the Himalayan regions of which this animal is endemic. Other states with a good amount of population were Arunachal, Sikkim and Jammu Kashmir. It's also to be noted that globally, the highest population of snow leopard subspecies is found in China. The exact numbers are yet to be released by the authorities, but after China, it is a very positive development because in most of the countries where it used to exist, the population has either come down severely because already this snow leopard species has been in the IUC and the International Union of Conservation of Nature endangered list. So therefore, it's a very positive development coming from India. And today, if you talk about the global population of snow leopards, that's just 3,000 to 7,000 worldwide. So in that light, we must understand that this initiative that was taken to prevent, protect and proliferate their population has really done well. And this is quite a positive piece of news here, that the overall population in India has come to a seizable number of 781. Now, as per the report, there are further initiatives that are also to be taken to prevent the remaining population, such as creating a separate dedicated snow leopard cell under the Wildlife Institute of India with focusing a long-term growth of population of snow leopards. That's one initiative. Apart from that, states and union territories are also trying to do a periodic survey every 4th year, an estimation of the population of snow leopards in their state. Again, that could help in giving real-time data about the remaining population. The regular assessment will provide websites, challenges, threats which this particular species is confronting, and then we can foster better policies towards conservation. And the exercise, as I said, from 2019 to 2023 has estimated a couple of states in India with the highest calculation of snow leopards. So in these states, an aggressive campaign is sought to be done by the WII as well. Surveys are also pointing towards a two-step rescue method. One is first evaluating in which particular belts are the snow leopards located today, where aggressive action has to be taken for prevention. Second step could be, as we discussed from the snapshot of the article, that cameras can be installed to rightly not only estimate the population, to provide speedy help in case there is a health hazard or extinction hazard that these animals should face. So, as per the visual estimates, about 241 visual images were captured, and then this will also be a big shoot in the arm for the government, who is focusing a lot to preserve this particular genre of animals. And now we proceed with an art and culture news snippet for prelims that was picked up from page 14. We are talking about the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Council, is an organ of the UN that tries to promote world peace, cooperation between countries by focusing on specific areas of art, literature, culture. The intention is to promote global cultural heterogeneity, which means that different areas, regions, different communities of the world are rich in their own culture and natural heritage. So to promote them is one of the main ideas behind UNESCO, and for this purpose there is a World Heritage List that is estimated. The purpose of the list is to keep account of all the important natural heritage sites as well as cultural heritage sites which have made an impactful contribution in human history, which are important and unique to various civilizations. And in that light, recently, the Indian government has decided to nominate 12 forts from Maharashtra to the upcoming UNESCO World Heritage List. What's the significance of this? The significance is that Maratha military landscape is associated with a chain of forts, constructions that show the excellence of defense strategy, the excellence of construction, the excellence of military power of the Maratha rulers dating back to 17th, 18th century, much before that even. So now, the 12 components of this category of nomination are forts of Salher, Shiveni, Lohargarh, Khanderi, Raigad, Rajgarh, Pratapgarh, similarly Suvarnadurg, Panhala, Vijayadurg and Sindhudurg. Some of these are the border of Maharashtra along with Tamil Nadu. Now, Maharashtra or Maratha military landscapes are acquiring such an important position today because, as I said, created back in 17th, 18th centuries, much before that in fact, they are about excellence of fortification, excellence of defense construction and the profound military system of this dynasty. So that contributes to a rich natural as well as cultural site of India. Now, these forts are organized in various hierarchical structures. They are slightly different from each other when you talk about the construction features. It is also because the terrain of the area is different that determines the style of architecture here. And specifically, this can be attributed to the Sahyadri mountain ranges in the Western Ghats because that's where the monuments are housed. And the Maratha military landscape of India, therefore, is in the tentative list of World Heritage Sites since a very long time, since 2021, and today the government is mulling the idea of promoting it to the World Heritage List itself. On that note, let's also remember that although we have certain natural sites and certain cultural sites, but there is a specific site in India in Sikkim, which is referred to as the Kanchenjunga National Park. Now that comes in the intersection of both. It is not only a cultural site but also a natural heritage site. So that's worth remembering. It's a mixed World Heritage Site. And India today is talking about 42 World Heritage Sites, while 34 of them are natural. The remaining ones, 34 of them are cultural, the remaining are natural, and then one mixed site that we just spoke about. So here's a comprehensive list of the 6 World Heritage Sites. And let's also remember that it's a unique effort in preventing cultural heterogeneity within the country itself. Now coming to our last piece of news, that's again GS paper 3, but science and technology. And this corresponds to a latest shocking research that was made. The research has shocked the astronomers across the globe. Why? Because we are talking about research in the perspective of black holes. Now we know that black holes are a segment of universe which have triggered not only curiosity, but also they are shrouded in mystery pretty much. So here, this article highlights how recently a unique mass has been discovered. This unique mass could do wonders in revealing certain secrets corresponding to black holes which are yet unknown to the scientists. Now, to understand this, let's go back to the basics of the article. The article says that when a star that's massive, when a massive star starts dying down, there are 2 things that could happen. One thing is that it will become a speck of nebular star. Another is it could end up becoming a massive black hole. In case the mass of the star after breaking down is around 2.2 times the mass of Sun, it will be characterized as a nebular neutron star. But in case the mass expands and it becomes into 5 times of the solar mass, then it would become a black hole. The typical mystery spoken about in the article is the gap between the two. What happens in between the two? That was unknown for a long time. That was the dark area that nobody knew about. So this recently discovered object is proposed to solve the mystery of mass gap. Now, what is mass gap? The mass gap is the territory between the two that we are not aware about. So therefore, the discovery of a strange mass that has been done now could solve a lot of mystery regarding what really exists between these two situations. On the one hand, the neutron star, and on the other hand, the black hole itself. So black holes, as we understand, are spaces with too much density, that they collapse in their own matter. And the fact that the gravity becomes so high that nothing, not even light, can escape from them. And they experience a massive pull to the objects around them. So now, this massive dark that has been discovered is sought to explain what happens at the boundary of the black hole, what happens in the boundaries of the nebular neutron stars. So as per the article, neutron stars are also one of the most dense objects that exist in the solar system, in the universe, and because they are as compact as atomic nucleus, there is yet research to be done about understanding at what limits do they end existing. So that is an area of controversy. So this is a very thought-provoking article, and it could open up many more vistas in the field of black hole astronomical research. And with this, we come to an end of today's discussion. I hope you enjoyed the discussion today, and in case you were benefited by the initiative, do press the like and subscribe button. I take your leave, and thank you so much to all of you.